He sat looking at the floor. The love of his life had walked out the door and was gone. Sitting there, he felt like his heart was going to break into 1,001 pieces. This definitely wasn't how things were meant to be. He'd been convinced that he'd found happily ever after. They'd been so happy together. They were one another's best and closest friend. Life had been absolutely perfect. Then, one of his friend's wives had invited her to attend one of their fellowship meetings. He went along too. He picked up immediately that there was something seriously wrong. For one thing, they took 3 offerings. The leader complaining people hadn't given enough to please God. This wasn't just some normal church. The way they idolized their leaders made his skin crawl. They had meetings 6 days a week. He noticed every one of them looked exhausted. And the leader, wow, he was one of the most arrogant men he'd ever met in his life. When he asked questions they couldn't answer, he could see the seething hatred in their eyes. It was then they started to love bomb her. Suddenly, she was surrounded by people telling her how beautiful she was, and how much they liked her. It was totally insincere. In less than a year they'd tell him, "Oh, we realized she never was a real believer to begin with." They'd come to his home and not even acknowledge him. Then, the day came when one of them was literally impersonating his wife on Skype, telling him he needed to accept their leader and donate 10% of his income to the fellowship. He had immediately picked up the syntax and words were not even remotely those of his wife. And so he pressed the call button on Skype, and stupidly, they answered. He could hear them whispering, "Quickly, hurry up, it's your husband." They left the microphone on so he heard every single word. "Are they pretending to be you now?" he asked her. "Yes," she replied, "but they only want you to join the fellowship." If ever anyone needed proof that they were dealing with a cult, this was it. But it was too late. She called him the next day and told him, "Honey, I'm not allowed to let you speak against the fellowship. Therefore, we must divorce." It was like some horrible nightmare. Like that old movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They told her that she had to leave him, and by then, it was just too late. She was like a robot, lifeless, monosyllabic, empty, devoid of personality. He felt like he was watching a car wreck in slow motion. And nothing he did or said could make any difference. But there he was, alone. And so, he did what seemed like the best thing at the time. He packed a suitcase, bought a ticket, and flew off halfway around the world to start a new life in Asia. But although living in a new culture with all it had to offer him helped him to push the hurt away from his mind, it was still there. And so, many times, he'd wake up in the night and reach out for her. And it would hit him all over again. He was alone. He had nobody to spend his days with. He went to see movies. But it's just not the same. No matter where he went, he'd see couples. Couples eating together. Couples holding hands. Couples talking with other couples. But he was alone. Always alone. Worst of all was the silence. Having nobody to talk to was starting to do his head in. He didn't realize it. but he was going through the famous 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and the final one, acceptance. It doesn't matter who you are, if you've broken up with someone you love, you're going to go through these same stages. And so he wasted a couple of years in denial, telling himself that the love they had was so strong, and the good times so good, that it would withstand anything. He wrote to her every single week for a year, always hopeful, always full of confidence that something would happen, that God would hear his prayers and bring her back. And a year later, when she sent him a package in the post, he felt like his heart would burst with happiness. He went to a local river and sat down to open her package, only to see it was every letter he had sent her over the last year. Unopened, unread, just sent back without even a single comment. It was then the anger kicked in. Anger at the cult she'd gotten involved in. Anger at their self-righteous hypocrisy in encouraging her to divorce him after he refused to join their bizarre fellowship and accept their leaders. It was then that he entered the bargaining stage, refusing to accept reality. He made all kinds of promises to himself and God. He'd do absolutely anything to get her back into his life. And so he pressed on, trying to make bargains with life. But life simply wasn't listening. And then the day came when depression knocked on his door. Only someone who has stood in his shoes can relate to what he went through. He was like a dead man walking. From the moment he woke up, life became like one huge heavy burden that was grinding him down. It was as if time itself had slowed down. An hour seemed like a week. A month felt like a year. He was surprised. He honestly had no idea that anyone could feel a pain that deep. He started thinking of different ways to end it all. At the same time, he felt utterly exhausted, as if he'd aged 50 years overnight. The only thing that helped him was escaping into Netflix, watching thousands of movies, TV shows, and documentaries. It wasn't that they even interested him. They just helped drown out the noise of depression for a while. And then one day, he woke up and realized it was time to accept reality. The love of his life was gone. She really was never coming back, no matter what he did. He made the decision to let go. Let go once and for all. Over the next year, he slowly started to come alive again. And one January morning he woke up and realized somewhere there was somebody just like him. Someone longing for love. And it became his mission in life to find her. Continued Part 2.